This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Agan Shabbos. We are now, the Yom Tov of Sukkos is upon us. Only a few days left. Even though the Yom Tov of Sukkos is 8 days here, 9 days in Chutz La'aretz, but we don't have that much time to prepare for it. We don't even have as many days to prepare as there are days of Yom Tov. But we'll try to chap arayin as much as we can. Now, one of the primary mitzvahs of Sukkos is, of course, the Daled Minim. Torah says, "V'lakachtem lachem bayem harishayin, pri etz hadar, kavos tamarim, anaf etz avos, v'arvei nachal." It says the mitzvah of taking pri etz hadar is the Esrog, kavos tamarim is the Lulav, anaf etz avos is the Hadasim, v'arvei nachal is the Aravos. And the question is, what do you take first? Which one do you pick up first? And which one do you put down first? Now I think, if you look around, most people, they pick up their Lulav first, and then they pick up their Esrog. So let's see, what is the correct procedure? What do you put down first? I think most people put down their Lulav first. It's easier. So let's see, what's the correct thing to do? Is there a recommended way to do it, or is it discretionary? Is it up to you? So we begin with the Shelah Kadosh in Masechta Sukkah. Says the Shelah Kadosh, Oid Sham be'emek bracha. He quotes the Sefer Emek Bracha. Kasav ha ibn Shuib. Now in the past we've pronounced it ibn Shvaib. Whether this is the correct pronunciation, I don't know, but this is what it says. The Ibn Shuib writes, B'drasha Sukkos, B'zel L'shaynai. The Shamati, I heard. So this is the Emek Bracha, quoting the Ibn Shuib, I heard, Sheyesh Adam lahaktim netilas ha'esrog b'smal. First you pick up the esrog in your left hand. V'yachar kach lulav b'yamin. And then you pick up the lulav in your right hand. That's a big chiddush. Why? First you pick up the esrog in your left hand, and then the lulav in your right hand. And how about when you put it down? Uchshemanichai, when you place it, oy noisno, you give this to someone else. The opposite. Noisen halulav tchila, you give the lulav first, v'yachar kacha esrog, and then the esrog. Why? Ke'inyan ha-tefillin. Lulav and esrog is just like tefillin. Just like by tefillin, first you put on the shel yad, and then you put on the shel rosh, and so you could say by tefillin you're going up in kedusha. The shel yad only has one ois of the shakai, the shel rosh has the shin and the dalet, so you're going up in kedusha. And when you take off your tefillin, first you take off the shel rosh, and then you take off the shel yad. So too with lulav and esrog. First you take the esrog, maybe, and then you're maleh to the lulav, which has 3 minim. And then when you depart, you put down the lulav and then the esrog.
It says creates other first in the Torah.
Exactly. That's why you take the. It's another reason to take the esrog first.
Oh, yeah.
So it works out. V'chein hikdim ha-pasuk creates other, and in fact that's what the pasuk is makdim, the esrog. Just like u'kamosh amru b'tefillin, like we say by Tuan. Ukshartam la'ois al yadecha, and only then v'hayu l'toitafos b'neinecha. Kozman sheyu ha-toitafos b'neinecha. We learn that as long as the toitafos are between your eyes, in other words, as long as you're wearing tefillin shel rosh, you shtayim, you have to be wearing tefillin shel yad. So listen very carefully. The same way you're not allowed to wear tefillin shel rosh without tefillin shel yad on, right? Mm-hmm. That's why we don't take off the shel yad first. Because if you take off the shel yad first, you're wearing the shel rosh without a shel yad. You're not allowed to have a shel rosh without a shel yad. As long as the shel rosh is on, you have to have the shel yad. So too, you can't be holding a lulav without an esrog. You can't have a lulav in your hands without an esrog. You're not allowed to. And therefore, first you pick up the esrog, and then you take the lulav. You put the lulav down, and then you put the esrog down. But the problem now you encounter is if you want to give your lulav and esrog to somebody else. You hear? Because you have to take the esrog first, and then you take the lulav. But when you're putting it down, what do? You have to give the lulav first, and then the esrog. But what do you mean you give the lulav first? The other person has to take the esrog first. So now you can have it's like a boxing match when you have to give somebody Lulav and Esrog. Because you have to give the Lulav first and he has to take the Esrog first. So I don't know, what should you do? You give the Lulav and he grabs the Esrog. The only thing you could do is you got to put it down on the table. First you put down the Shel Yad, the Shel Rosh, the Lulav. Then you put down the Shel Yad, the Esrog, and he takes the Shel Yad, the Esrog, and then he takes the Shel Rosh, the Lulav. You never heard this, right? This is what the Shelah HaKadosh says. First you take the Esrog, and then you take the Lulav, the opposite of what we do. And then you take then you put down...
Is somebody parking in the driveway right in front of the cars here? I can't get out.
Then you put down the here, thank you. Then you put down the Lulav, and then followed by the Esrog. So he says a Shelah, Alkein, Bekilais Hanoyagos, Lumkar Makoim, Esal Shech Tzibor. Therefore, in places where the custom is to sell the place next to the shots, after the Shech Tzibor shakes Lulav and Esrog, Noisein ha-Esrog v'Lulav l'oisei sha'omed etzlai, he gives the Lulav and Esrog to the person standing next to him, Shehu yinana b'shah shemanana kol, that you'll shake when the kol is shaking. In other words, in those communities where somebody's going to have to borrow the Lulav and Esrog of the Shech Tzibor, while after Shech Tzibor shakes, he's going to pass it off to somebody else. Shech Tzibor has to put it down on some place. And from that place, the person will take it. Shech Tzibor first puts down the Lulav. Lulav is like the Shel Rosh. Then he puts down the Esrog, which is like the Shel Yad. By the way, it comes out interesting, if the Esrog is similar to the heart, the Shel Yad is opposite the Lev. And the Lulav represents the spine, and the Hadassim represent the eyes, and the Aravas represent the lips, all on the Rosh. So maybe that's why it's connected to Shel Rosh. I always said, an interesting thing, I was always bothered, the Poskim say that the Hadassim should be higher than the Aravas. One of the reasons they give is because the eyes are higher than the lips. Right? So I was always bothered, well, if that's the case, then they should both be higher than the Lulav. Because the Lulav is the spine, and the eyes and the lips are both higher than the spine. So I always thought to say, based on another question, and that is, the heart is represented, the eyes are represented, the lips are represented, and the most important part of the body is not represented. The brain. We hope people have that.
Actually,
so
the
why?
Esrog looks a little like the brain.
Yeah, but
If you take a look at the brain looks with the little, pieces coming up, the part of the bumps. That's the way an Esrog looks.
And yet we say it's representing the heart. So I always thought when we say that the Lulav represents the spine, the ikar part of the Lulav is the top of the Lulav, right? Maybe because it's not just the spine; it's the spinal column.
All right, it's attached to the head.
The spinal column, which is the brain. The brain is higher, possibly, than the eyes and the lips. Okay, but that being the case, so we have philosophically, we understand then that the Esrog is keneged the Shel Yad, which is keneged the Lev, and the Lulav, which is has the parts which are keneged the Rosh, are keneged the Tzon Shel Rosh.
But we just said the Lulav is really Malin B'Kodesh over the Esrog, right?
Well, maybe that's what we look. You hold the Lulav in the right hand because they're more minim in the right hand. Right.
But everybody, if you were to ask 100 people, what's the most important of the Arba Minim? They're going to tell you the price is always set on the basis of the Esrog.
True.
You're not buying a set for $100 because you got a Lulav or the Hadass from the Arba. That's the Esrog.
On the other hand, this year they say it the other way. Because this year it's after the Shemitah year, right? So the question is, okay, many people buy their Esrog, Italian Esrogim, Yaneva Esrogim, but from Eretz Yisrael it's a problem. It's Shemitah. You can't use Shemitah fruits. So the different Heterim.
From Otzer Bezdin.
Well, Otzer Bezdin, but now there's a question. Otzer Bezdin may only work if the package is sealed, not if it's open. Most people want to see it. So it's a question in halacha whether you could buy a esrog from Eretz Yisrael where it's open. But one of the heterim, and you'll ask, your local Orthodox rabbi whether you can rely on this. One of the heterim is the esrog is just sold b'havla. The ikar is the lulav and the hadassim and the arava, and the esrog is just like nivla. So
You spend a lot more time looking for an esrog than you do looking for a lulav.
So if you like that svara,
And the price of lulav depends on which esrog.
But in any event, okay, back to
Lulav is also no good. It's open at the top.
so. But back to the ranch over here. But if you're going to, according to the Shelah, if you're going to hand off the lulav and esrog to someone else, one of you is doing the wrong thing. Because the person holding it, he has to put down the esrog first and then the lulav, and the one taking it, he has to take the lulav first and then the esrog. He says, "Aval miyad liyad lo yinaka echad mehem mimanav shach." One of them won't be doing the right thing. If the shliach tzibur passes the lulav first, then the makabel is taking the lulav first, and it's not right. And if he gives the esrog first, then the shliach tzibur is not doing the right thing. In other words, right? If the shliach tzibur hands him the lulav first, can't do that. He used to be putting down the what?
The lulav makabel is technically one thing first.
The esrog.
But then the makabel is taking the lulav first, which is not right. And if he puts down the esrog first,
The shliach tzibur is doing it wrong.
then the shliach tzibur has to first put down the lulav. Right. Okay. So that is the Shelah Kadosh quoting the Emek Bracha, who quotes the Ibn Shueb. The Magen Avram. How does the Magen Avram paskin? So you would say, come on. I never heard of this shot. That first you pick up the esrog, and then you pick up the lulav, and first you put down the lulav, and then you put down the esrog. I never heard of that. Says the Magen Avram. Well, you better have heard of it, because this is how we paskin. We paskin yitol tchila ha-esrog. First you take the esrog, and then you take the lulav. Uchshamasalik, and when you put it down, yisalik ha-lulav tchila. First you put down the lulav. Dumya de tefillin. Again, by the way, this would be another one of the reasons we don't take tefillin on Yom Tif is the mitzvahs hayayim are nice. So it's similar to the shalyat and the sharash.
Does Magen Avraham say you have to take the esrog in your left hand, or can you take it in your right and move it to the left?
Well, he says you take it. He doesn't say, but presumably he's quoting the Matei Moshe. The Matei Moshe quotes the Ibn Shueb. So and he says you take the esrog in your left hand. You can't hand it then to your friend. You need to put it down. So first you put down the lulav, then you put down the esrog, but the person who picks it up, he has to pick up the esrog first, and then the lulav. How about the Ber Heitev? The Ber Heitev says, right there, he quotes the Magen Avram, V'yakdim netilas ha'esrog b'smoil, v'yachar kach halulav b'yamin. First you pick up the esrog, then you pick up the lulav, and when you put it down, you give the lulav first and then the esrog, and if you want to hand it to somebody, you have to put it down and the person picks it up. Okay, so far the Shelah, the Magen Avram, and the Ber Heitev all say, they're all unanimous, that you must take the esrog first. Comes the Noda B'Yehuda, in the Haggai's Dago Mervava, he said, no, sorry, nice try. He said it's a mistake. He says, Dover zeh, look at number 5. Sheyisalek halulav tchila, huvadai shgaga. This idea that the Shelah says, that the Ibn Shueb says, that the Emek Bracha says, that the Magen Avram says, that the Ber Heitev is wrong. Okay? Right. This idea, okay, right, so the first thing there are really two independent things that the Ibn Shueb says. The first thing he says is first you pick up the esrog and then the lulav. And the second thing is, first you put down the lulav and then the esrog. What's the logic of that statement? Just like whenever you're wearing shel rosh, you must be wearing the shel yad. So too, whenever you have a lulav, you must be holding an esrog. You cannot hold a lulav without an esrog, and therefore you cannot put down the esrog first. So Noda says, what in the world do tefillin got to do with lulav and esrog? What's the connection? He says, Vadai shkog, it's a mistake. Why? The Gemara asks the question. Because if you look in the Gemara Menachos, let's take a look. Let's learn the Gemara number 4. The Gemara says, Tana, kishehu maniach shal yad, v'achar kach maniach shal rosh. When you put on your tefillin, first you put on the shal yad, and then you put on the shal rosh. Ukshu choyleitz, and when you take off your tefillin, choyleitz shal rosh, v'achar kach choyleitz shal yad. First you take off the shal rosh, and then you take off the shal yad. Says the Gemara, Bishlam akshu maniach shal yad, v'achar kach maniach shal rosh. I get it why first you put on tefillin shal yad and then shal rosh, because that's what the Torah says. It says, Ukshartam la'oisah yadecha, v'ayot ha'tavas b'neinecha, l'suvisham la'oisah yadecha, v'hadavar la'oisah b'neinecha. That's the order of the Torah. Elakshu choylet shal rosh v'achar choylet shal min minolan. Why would you first take off the shal rosh and then the shal yad? Amar Rabba Rav Huna, Azroli, Rabbi said Rav Huna explained to me, Amar Kra, v'hayu l'toitafos bein einecha. It should be toitafos between your eyes. Kozman shabein einecha, whenever it's between your eyes, yiyu shtayim. You need to be wearing 2. Which means a shal rosh cannot be one. You can never just have a shal rosh on. You can never just have a shal rosh on your head. Whenever there's a shal rosh on your head, you must have a shal yad on. And therefore, the only way to remove it is remove the shal rosh first.
What, to is 2?
No. Well, how do I know 2? We'll see.
Does that mean that a person whose arm, hospital is injured, he can't put on tefillin, he can't put on the shal rosh?
No, it doesn't mean that. You have no choice. But that's a Yaakov. I'm not telling you right now what the limud is. That's what Gemara says. Gemara says, whenever you have tefillin shal rosh, you must have tefillin shal yad. So the Dagam Rav asks, that means there's a specific limud by tefillin, that whenever you have a shal rosh, you must be wearing a shal yad. Who says there's any limud by Lulav and Esrog that whenever you have a Lulav, you must be holding an Esrog?
Is there a svara in the opposite direction?
That what?
That you should put down the Esrog first before you put down the Lulav? I mean, he says Vadai Shvaga.
It's a mistake to say you have to do it this way. Just because tefillin, by tefillin you have Exeris HaKasav. Now, exactly what the limud is, we're in the pasuk of Shartam la'oisah yadecha v'hayu l'toitafos. Now, let's assume that the Dagam Mervava is learning like Rashi. Rashi says, look at number 7. V'hayu mashma shtayim. The word v'hayu implies 2. What's v'hayu?
They.
And they should be. What do you mean they? I only have a shal rosh on. What do you mean and they should be a toitafos b'nei necha? What's they? Who's the they?
The words. The words.
Hopefully your eyes are aligned and you see one pair of shal rosh. You're not seeing double. How many fingers do you see? You should only be seeing one shal rosh.
No, the words should be between your eyes. The words is Torah.
You have multiple parshiot in the shal rosh.
It's one thing.
Says Rashi, the drush is the word from v'hayu. Presumably the Noda is learning like Rashi, and in that case it says v'hayu. But when the Torah says ulakachtem lachem v'ayayim harishon pri'etz hadar v'chapos tamarim, does it say v'hayu kapos tamarim? It says v'kapos tamarim. So from where mehechi teisi that kozman that you have kapos tamarim, you need to have pri'etz hadar. If the only way we know it by tefillin is from the word v'hayu, and v'hayu is absent by Lulav and Esrog, then why would you think that kolzman that you have kapos tamarim you need to have pri'etz hadar? And therefore v'imkein zev vadai toasu. It's not maybe a mistake; it's definitely a mistake. The Shelah Kadosh and the Emek Bracha and the Even Shuib and the Magen Avraham and the Ber Hete, they all say you must put down the Lulav first. Vadai Ta'asu. Even Moshe Rabbeinu can make a mistake. So therefore it says in Noda Yehuda, all of these Achronim, Vadai Shkaga, Vadai Ta'as. Okay, so that's the first thing. This idea the Dagam Ravava holds, It's a mistake to say you put down the lulav first. Ella, now he's going to attack the second halacha. That the Shelah and all the above mentioned achronim say you have to pick up the Esrog first. Ella afilu lechatchila shikach Esrog tchila gam kein lani is dadi en luma davar zeh mitzvah. The fact that you have to take an Esrog first, there's no limud from tefillin. In other words, we wanted to say just like tefillin that says ukshartam la'os al yadecha vayula toita v'os ben yadecha, just like shel yad comes first, and then by Lulav and Esrog it says l'kan l'amem rishon priyetz hadar v'chapos tamarim. Now he doesn't say why you don't learn it out from tefillin. V'yesh b'zeh arichos dvarim. It's a long issue. I'm not going to get into it, he says. So we don't know exactly why he doesn't like the analogy. But now here's the
Be'er Cave, the Magen Avraham, and the others, do they hold this for all of Yom Tov or just for Yom Rishon? Do you have to do it this way?
all of Yom Tov.
So
And here's the third. Here's the real clincher. Aval ma'oid t'mahani. But here's what I'm really bothered by, says the Dagmar Baba. The Shelah HaKadosh, and the Emek Bracha, and the Evan Shuiv, and the Magen Avraham, and the Ber Heitev. Eich lo shas ha-Magen Avraham inav l'sheber Rambam. The Magen Avraham didn't see the Rambam. V'toisus, the Aptalik test, and Toisus, Uberash, and the Rosh, Uvetor, Kan, Mefura sheyitel ha-lulav tchila. They all say you have to take the lulav first. Now the question is, the Dagmar Baba, he just didn't do us one favor here. He didn't tell us where the Rambam is, where Toisus is, where the Rosh is, and where the Torah is. So, Rambam, that narrows it down to the Yad HaChazaka, right? So, Toisus, that narrows it down to all the Toisus in Shas.
Assume we would know.
Right?
That's what Daf says. He says Daf.
The only thing is, Daf like this. That narrows it down to the Masechtas that have at least 99 blat. Yeah. Because it's not Masechta Sukkah, right? So Masechta Sukkah, it's ending after Samach. So what's he talking about? It's clear what he's referring to is the following halacha. Everybody knows there's a big dilemma. Okay, you're supposed to make a bracha over l'asiyasam, right? So how do you make a bracha lulav and esrog? Before you pick it up, you can't make the bracha before you pick it up. It's too far in advance. After you pick up lulav and esrog, kivan da'agvei kvar yatsa. Once you picked up, you're ready to the mitzvah.
Too far in advance.
Just like you don't make a bracha on your talis when it's still in the bag, it has to be right before you make the mitzvah.
So you can do it right before you pick it up. Huh?
So it takes practice. Not so easy.
It has to be that close?
Yeah.
Like tefillin, it isn't that close.
Yes, it is.
I'm sure there's something wrong.
You're about to make the knot, you make the bracha, and then you tighten it.
By the way, why doesn't the bracha al netilas arbaminim? Why is it on the lulav? Mashma, the lulav emphasizes the higher level of.
Right, because the lulav is the tallest. He's saying lulav. So the lulav also has the most minim with it, right?
You should still say al arbaminim. There wouldn't be.
I hear. Okay.
You're giving a slap in the face.
It's a good question. It's a Inyan. That's an Inyan. Why the bracha is that? But we know there's a very big issue how to make the bracha on the lulav. So there are different ways around this. One way is you pick up the esrog upside down. One way is, by the way, that way is not suggested in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay? So yeah. One way is, why don't you pick it up and don't have kavanah to be yotzei? Not so clear, because if mitzvos don't need kavanah, then you worry it. So one way is have in mind not to be yotzei. Now the reason why we don't always suggest that is it's hard to tell people what to think. Right? It's easier to tell people what to do than to tell people what to think. So we tell them pick it up upside down. The Shulchan Aruch says like this. Look at number 6. Yevarech al netilas lulav b'shechianu kaidem sheyitol ha'esrog. Before you take the esrog, kedei sheyevarech over asiyasai. Oh, excuse me. No, it does suggest it. I'm mistaken. Or turn the esrog upside down. Either don't pick up the esrog, or hold the lulav, but don't pick up the esrog, or put the esrog upside down. What do you see clearly from the Shulchan Aruch here? Take the lulav first. Because the Shulchan Aruch says, you pick up the lulav, and if you want to know about the bracha, either don't pick up the esrog, or put the esrog upside down. So the Shulchan Aruch, and this is what he means, the Rambam discusses this, Tosfos discusses the Rosh. The Eitzah is either don't pick up the esrog, or pick it up upside down. But it's clear from this conversation that first you pick up the lulav, and then you pick up the esrog. So the Rabbi says, with all your analogies to tefillin, analogies ahina, analogies aher, you have to, what are the Rishonim saying? They say clearly, you pick up the lulav and then the esrog. Now you should know that in some of the Svarim they write that to follow the Ivin Shuib and the Imek Bracha, because Kol Divrei Divrei Kabbalah. So it could be there is some kind of Kabbalistic reason to first pick up the Esrog and then the Lulav, and then to put down the Lulav first. But again, we know if there's a conflict between Halacha and Kabbalah, you follow the Halacha. So again, the Gemara was saying, if you want to know what to do, you follow the Rishonim. Rishonim say, first you pick up the Lulav, and then you pick up the Esrog. I think that's what most people do. That's what I always did before I learned this Inyan. I take out the Lulav and then the Esrog. And when I put down, before I learned this Inyan, I don't think I wasn't, thinking to do it davka a certain way. The Dagam Ravava would say, it's not legislated. The Shelah would say, no, you davka should put down the Lulav first. So in terms of putting it down, okay, so let's see.
Rabbi, from a practical point of view, you put down the lulav first only because you have to be really careful with how you put the esrog, or you'd have to break the pitta.
Right.
So if you were just to put down the esrog first, still have lulav in your hand, it becomes more difficult to put the lulav away. And
I don't know.
Just from logistics.
It's probably easier to passel your lulav than it is the esrog. If you open up the tiyomes, if you don't put it in correctly, you bang it.
You're just putting it down.
Okay.
Whatever.
So,
trust me, from experience, I did it twice in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
That's why I got it out of pitta.
It's interesting. Let's come back to the Noda B'Yehuda. The Noda B'Yehuda says that there's no comparison between tefillin and lulav and esrog. By tefillin, there's a specific limud of v'hayu. V'hayu, Rashi says, means shnayim. There's no such limud by lulav and esrog. That's how Rashi learns. Comes the Chasam Sofer, and the Hagoy is Chasam Sofer, and he comes and he tries to answer the question of the Noda B'Yehuda, Dagmar Ravava. Chasam Sofer says, Tchila, he quotes the Magen Avram, who says, first you take the esrog, and then you take the lulav, and first you put down lulav. Nichtav b'tzidai, b'menacha is daf lamed vav amid alf, and menacha is daf lamed vav, perish Rashi, the tefillin mapik le midachsiv v'hayu lashon rabim, mashma b'nei necha yiu shtayim. V'im kain eino inyan lulav, therefore it would have no connection to lulav. V'chein hiksha hadagol mervava. But says the Chasam Sofer, it's known that the Chasam Sofer was a proponent of looking everything up. Chasam Sofer says all of his gadlus came, he never trusted anybody. Anytime somebody quoted something, he always looked it up. He said, Achiyanti b'sefer matei Moshe. I looked it up. Umaisi kain b'shem Even Shuib. You see, the Magen Avram quoted the Matei Moshe. But I looked up the Matei Moshe. He quotes the Even Shuib. De'eno mefarish kaperish Rashi. The Even Shuib does not learn that Gemara like Rashi, that how do we know that whenever you're wearing Shel Rosh, you have to have two, you have to have Shel Yad also. Delav mi v'hayu mapik. He doesn't learn it from v'hayu. Elahachi perusha dekra. Kozman divahayu loisa yadecha yiu toitafos b'nei necha v'lo yia rega toitafos b'loyos. Says Chasam Sofer, there's another way to learn the Gemara. Not v'hayu means two. If you learn the Gemara that v'hayu means two, then it says v'hayu by tefillin, it doesn't say v'hayu by dalad minim. But there's another way to learn that Gemara. And that's like this. Ukshartam la'ois ayadecha v'hayu l'toitafos b'nei necha. That means like this. As long as you're wearing toitafos, you have to have an ois. In other words, if it says A and then it says B, B has to only be there when A is already there. So that's a limud that could apply to Lulav and Esrog as well. As long as you have kapos tamarim, you must have priyetz hadar. Says the Chassam Sofer, Chinami darshinon kozman shetoifes priyetz hadar. Oh, a little differently than I said. By tefillin, as whenever you have an oisa yodecha. I'm not sure he says it both ways, so he has to mean the way I said it first. Otherwise, in other words, it says "Ukshatim la'oisa yodecha v'hayu l'toita fos b'neinecha." You can't have shel rosh, you can't have toitafos without ois. So too, whenever you're holding priyetz hadar, he says it both ways. What he means is lo yiyah kapos tamarim b'loy priyetz hadar, which means as long as you have the kapos tamarim, you must have the priyetz hadar. And therefore the Noda Yehuda was learning like Rashi. According to Rashi, it's from V'hayu. V'hayu is not a word that it says by Daled Minim. But if it's not from V'hayu, if it's just the way, the flow of the pasuk, that whenever there's beinei necha, there has to be an ice. So too, whenever there is kapos tamarim, there has to be priyetz hadar.
The other way around, it says kshartim the osal yedecha, that when you have the kshartim osal yedecha, then you must have hayil tutavos beinei necha. That's what the pasuk says in that order. That it's the yad.
No, so it is.
You can't have the yad without having the shal.
No, it doesn't say you can't have the shal yad, because obviously you're putting on the shal yad first. So then you do have the shal yad without the shal rosh. If anything,
you must put on.
I would read it that the way to have a shal rosh on your head is only if there's already shal yad on, right?
It's telling you first to put on the shal yad.
Exactly. That means you could have. That means you could have a shal.
You can't put on the shal rosh before you put on the shal yad. You can only.
Okay, fine, but we're not dealing with the order. The order we got. It's the order it says. Question is. No. The pasuk is saying in order. The pasuk is saying in order. First shal yad and then shal rosh. But Chassam Sofer says another nuance of that pasuk is that the shel rosh could only be there kozman that it was set up with the situation where there's a shel yad. So too, the kapos tamarim can only be there if it's set up where there's a situation that there's a priyetz hadar. Okay, so what do we do, lamaisa? Who do we follow? Do we follow the opinion of the Emek Bracha and the Even Shuib and the Shelah and the Magen Avram and the Ber Heitev? Or do we follow the Dagel Mervala?
By the way, do any of them say that if you do it the other way, you're not Yotzei?
No, it's not a matter of Yotzei. Okay. So, I want to just bring to your attention, before I tell you the bottom line, I want to bring to your attention another Magen Avram. The Magen Avram is talking about the two eitzos of the Shulchan Aruch. One eitzah says you don't pick up the Esrog, and the other one is you turn the Esrog upside down. And the Magen Avram suggests, and if you don't have kavana to be yotzei, it's mutter. But you should not do this l'chachila, because some say mitzvahs ain't shus kavana. Umi unirali sheyikach mechaveroi halulav b'smoil. Ready for this? Again, the Magen Avram already told us who he sides with. He sides with the Shelah. That first you put down the Lulav, and then you put down the Esrog, and the person who takes it takes the Esrog, and then the Lulav. Sheyikach mechaver halulav b'smoil. Here's what you do. You take the Lulav in your left hand, first. V'yacha kachita la'esrog gam kein b'smoiloi. And then you take the Esrog also in your left hand. V'yacha kachika chaluva v'yamin. And then you take the Lulav in the right hand.
Transfer.
V'nimtza yotzi they shneim, and then you're yotzi both of them. After all, ayin b'shla b'shem even shuib. Look in the Shelah. What do you mean look in the Shelah? The Shelah says first you take the Esrog and then the Lulav. And here the Magen Avram is coming up with this very interesting possibility of what? First taking the Lulav, which is against the Shelah, in your left hand, and then taking the Esrog in your left hand, and then transferring the Lulav to the Esrog. And then you're yotzei both of them? What do you mean both of what? The Shelah said that you have a big dilemma, because when you want to hand off the lulav to somebody else, you need to put the lulav down, but he needs to take the esrog first. So here, I believe this is how the Levushe Srad explains the Magen Avraham, Levushe Srad of David Eibeshis. The Magen Avraham has invented a way you don't have to put it down. You can hand off. But the handoff Miman Shach is a problem, because you need to put the lulav down, he needs to take the esrog first. You only need to take the esrog first and then the lulav in the correct hands. But if you're taking it in the wrong hand, that's not called taking it. So what you do is, he could hand you the lulav first, which is what he needs to do. You take it in your left hand, but you're not to take the lulav first. I'm not taking the lulav first. That's not lekicha. Lekicha is in my right hand. Then I take the esrog in the left hand, which is the correct lekicha for the esrog. Then I take the lulav in the right hand.
Does that mean?
And with your help and your zchus, I just understood what the Magen Avraham means. In other words, the Shelah said we have a great dilemma. How do you hand off the lulav and esrog to somebody? He says, I just figured it out. The issue of taking the esrog first and then the lulav is only if you're going to do. Is only an issue that you have to do it. You have to take the esrog correctly first and then the lulav correctly second. But in this case, I'm not taking the lulav first because I'm taking it in my left hand. That's not the correct hand to take the lulav. So I take the lulav and you're giving it off correctly. Then I take the esrog with my left hand, which is the correct way of taking the esrog. So I'm taking the esrog first and then the lulav.
Does that mean to say that if somebody picked up the lulav and put the lulav in their left hand and put the esrog in the right hand and had the esrog in the right position with the piston up, right? That they're not Yotzei L'Kachta? Doing it in the right procedure, to me, it's got to be a diet. L'Kachtam L'chem. You took it, you would be Yotzei. You're right. You do the right sequence.
Yeah, but in terms of this inyan of picking up first, it's not ma'akev anyway. Elamai, there's an inyan of doing it the way the Torah says. You're Yotzei that way.
I mean, once he did it,
no, but we're not talking about the mitzvah. You're not doing the mitzvah now. Now you're trying to be Yotzei the inyan of taking the correct one first. That inyan is only.
But he's saying you take the lulav in the left hand.
That's not called taking it regarding this inyan.
You're not kind of L'Kachtam right then.
The two in the same hand.
Yes.
That's the difference. So either don't have kavana or. Okay. Yeah, right. Okay, so what do you do, Lamaisa? Do you follow the Magen Avraham, or do you follow the Matei Moshe? Do you follow the Matei Moshe Shelah, or do you follow the Noda Yehuda? So it didn't make it to the sheet.
For good reason.
It didn't make it to the sheet. The Likutei Maharich brings down. He says, "Ayin v'Magen Avraham b'shem haMatei Moshe v'Hashla litol tchila ha'esrog." First, you take the esrog because it's mentioned first. But because the Rambam, Tosis, and the Rosh and the Torah Mefarsh Diglu first. Look in the Achronim. The Yesh Noitin Lakan, Yesh Noitin Lakan. Some go this way, some go that way. So what should you do, Lamaisa? Uda Ovid Kamar Ovid. Pick them. Right. It's up to you. Whatever you like to do, you're doing like a viable, credible source. Rabbi say, have a great.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.